Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I've been reminded that Dina Dwyer and I are the only things that stand between now and dessert and the cigar reception, which for me is a little bit like teaching probability and statistics after lunch. Today I'd like to introduce Dina Dwyer-Owens. She is the co-chair of the Dwyer Group. America also knows her for participating in CBS's Emmy-winning hit reality show, Undercover Boss, and the first ever special episode, Undercover Boss, Epic Bosses. Dina is a certified franchise executive with more than 35 years of industry experience and 15 years as CEO of the Dwyer Group. That business, headquartered in Waco, Texas, now includes 19 service brands, 17 of which support a different franchise under the following service marks: AirServe, Glass Doctor, The Grounds Guys, 5-Star Painting, Molly Maid, Mr. Appliance, Mr. Electric, Mr. Handyman, Mr. Rooter, also known in the UK as the Drain Doctor, Protect Painters, Rainbow International, Locatech, Window Genie, Neighborly, Bright and Beautiful, and finally, Countrywide Grounds Maintenance. Collectively, those service brands and more than 2,800 franchisees make over 3 million customer calls a year and account for more than $1.5 billion in system-wide sales. In 2010, Dina served as the chair of the International Franchise Association in Washington, D.C., the world's largest advocacy group for franchising as a business format. She also spearheaded the reintroduction of the International Franchise Association's Vet Fran program in 2001, which now includes some 645 franchisors that offer franchising financial incentives to veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces. More than 6,000 military veterans now own a franchise through the Vet Fran program. Dina is the author of 2 books, Live Rich and Values Incorporated, that both share her global message for living and leading with a proven code of values. Dina is married to Mike Owens, and they have 2 wonderful and entrepreneurial children. Now, before I bring Dina up here, we have a short video clip that we would like to share with you.
There was a time when every home had someone to take care of it, to keep its lawn picnic-worthy, to make sure its floors were cleared for takeoff, to keep the lights on inside, the weather outside, and everything flushing as expected. But then life happened, busy happened, and along came modern technology to make everyone's lives easier. There would be a robot for this, an app for that, and again, every home would be taken care of. But somehow, all the technology in the world didn't give us another hour in the day or another day in the weekend. And turns out, all the amazing things we invented to manage our homes, they needed managing too. So here we are, the same grass growing outside, the same paint chipping off the molding, the same home in need of a caretaker. And maybe that's where we went wrong. Maybe we didn't need something to help take care of that home. Maybe what we needed was someone. Or even better, a whole community. People we trust, people we know, People we can call anytime for anything, and they'll be there. They'll be there because they've been there all along, right next door.
Please join me in welcoming Dina Dwyer-Owens.
Thank you. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you for clapping at that video. It warms my heart.
Dina, as you know, most companies these days have mission statements. They typically have vision statements. But the Dwyer Group has something called a code of values. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. I'm just curious, so out of the audience, how many of you have a code of values for your business? Okay, good. How many of you review those values on a monthly basis? Fewer hands. How many have reviewed them on a weekly basis? Fewer hands. How about daily? I think 1 or 2 hands. Okay, so good. That proves my point. 95% of the companies in North America do nothing with their values once they're written. And why is that? Well, at Dwyer, we believe it's because they just haven't figured out a good system for making the values part of their DNA. So we're a franchise company, right? What does a franchise company do? We take what's most important in a business and we create systems around what's most important so that those systems can be replicated. So we had values. Our founder started the company with values in 1981. They were more emotionally based beliefs, like things like we must re-earn our position every day in every way, and it was my father, by the way. So he would let me know whether he thought I had lived up to that value or not every day. And unfortunately, he's not here today, but I still hear it in my voice every time I head to my office. Remember, you must re-earn your position every day in every way. He passed away in 94, just after taking the company public in 93. Can you imagine that? Just took the company public, you die a year later. If he were here, he'd tease that going public killed him because it took a little control out of it away and he was a control freak. But we took his original values, and to answer your question finally, and we said, how do we keep this culture special that Don started this company on, which was the core values? And we took his original beliefs and we created what we call the operationalized code of values. We call it Living Rich at Dwyer Group, and it's not about money. It's first about treating people with respect and dignity. And so the acronym stands for respect, integrity, customer focus, and having fun. That's the rich. And we believe when you treat people with respect and integrity and you focus on the customers and you also enjoy what you're doing, that the profits always seem to follow, as long as it's a quality product or service that you're offering. So that's what we do with our code of values. So yes, we have a vision, we have a mission, we have values, but what we do differently, Harvey, is we review our values at the beginning of every meeting of 3 or more. So those of you who didn't raise your hand that you talk about it every day, it's an easy fix, right? Just go back to your values and say, let's talk about them every day. Anytime we have a meeting of 3 or more, let's take a deep breath. In our case, we have 15. Where's Father Spitzer? Father Spitzer's right here. Thank you for serving, offering Mass tonight. And I heard him say he memorizes the Gospels. And our employees complained about memorizing 15 values. So look, if Father Spitzer can memorize Gospels every day, I think any employee can memorize your values. That's the big tip of the night, by the way. Just create a system around your values. Talk about them every meeting of 3 or more.
Dina, do you think your customers know that your company has a code of values?
Do you want me to jump right to Net Promoter Score?
Could you please?
I could. How many of you are familiar with Net Promoter Score? It's the ultimate question. So in our business, we like to find out from the customer, how likely are you to refer us to a friend or family member? So that's the ultimate question. And hopefully, you're very likely and you'll be a promoter of our company. If you're not likely, you're a demoter. And if you're neutral, then that doesn't count for anything. So at dinner, Harvey and I were talking about Net Promoter Score. So yes, our end user customers do understand that we live with values. Some understand specifically what our values are because some of our franchisees are really good about going into the home and actually explaining what our values are. We've had some customers say, I'm adopting your values and we're going to discuss them at the dinner table with our kids, which is pretty impressive. Most don't, but some have said that. But the Net Promoter Score is the facts behind the service that we're providing with the values as a foundation. We talked about how Apple's got Net Promoter Score, what do we say, 69%?
Right.
How many of you like Apple? Oh, maybe I'm asking the wrong audience. Well, most people really like Apple. Then there's Amazon, who's in the 60s, and then there's Southwest Airlines, whose Net Promoter Score is in the 60s. Our franchisees, and this is not to boast or brag, these are facts, our franchisees rank as 74 in the home services business. So I think that's a reflection of, yes, the customers get that we really do work hard to live our values. We're not perfect, so a big disclaimer, we are far from a perfect company. I'm imperfect. All of our team members are imperfect. Every day we make mistakes, but we have this very high bar that we've set, that we try to reach every day. We don't always reach it, but we're better because of it.
Do you think your code of values has an impact on employee morale?
Absolutely. We attract employees. We're in Waco, Texas. How many of you are just dying to get to Waco, Texas? Other than for Fixer Upper, most people aren't really too interested in coming to Waco. So we've recruited amazing people at the highest leadership levels because they're attracted to Dwyer's values. They want to be part of something special where they can trust the leadership team. Trust is everything, isn't it? And the values create that trust level.
How do you instill a code of values into largely autonomous franchises?
It's not easy. Anybody in the franchising business out there? I know there's been franchisees. Yes, this gentleman told me he was a franchisee and he was so happy to have been a franchisee for a company for 21 years. Was that right? 24 years. Franchisees, what's interesting is they come to us mostly because we believe what they already believe. We just happen to have put their beliefs in writing, and that's our code of values. So most of them are attracted to being part of the Dwyer Group because we're aligned in our values. So that doesn't mean all of them follow the values perfectly, because they don't. We certainly have a handful of franchisees that we're working on coaching up, and if we can't coach them up, we're going to have to ask them to leave the company, and that's never fun. But most of them are there because they want to be part of a company that's aligned in our values, and as you can tell with the customer Net Promoter Score, they don't have a problem getting customers. Our problem right now is getting technicians. So,
when you're evaluating candidates for ownership of one of your franchises, how do you evaluate that candidate's capacity for virtue and talent for leadership?
yeah, I think it's tough to measure virtue. People are good salespeople. You know, and if you're a salesperson like I am, we're sold pretty easily. We can believe any other salesperson almost always. Yeah, it's a terrible thing, we salespeople. But what we find is we take people through what's called a qualification process. So we have what we call future franchisees who come through this process. And we do everything from a DISC profile, which is a real profile, trying to understand their leadership style. But we also talk about the values from the very beginning of the relationship. And what we find is that those who care about our values really want to be approved as a franchisee, and it's fun to be at a place in our 36 years of history where franchisees are saying, I hope I get approved. Future franchisees are saying that. And those who don't care about our values, they pretty much just don't come back. So they've made it through the process when they were invited to Waco, and we do something called an orientation, which is a full day, so we really get face-to-face. And if they feel that the values really aren't aligned with who they are and how they want to operate, then they don't want to move forward, and that's okay, because we're not good for each other. It's like a bad marriage starting. We don't want another bad marriage. We've got 2,800 really good marriages already, and I don't need another one that's not good.
So you've already addressed this a little bit, but let me ask it very specifically. How do you think a code of values converts into good profits?
Well, you guys got to see the Neighborly video. And that's a brand, an overarching brand we just launched about 5 months ago. And I think it's a perfect example of good profits. Because we have franchisees who are aligned in our values, and we're now at a scale where we have enough franchisees that if you need any of our services in your community, hopefully by going to getneighborly.com, we could take care of you. And the difference between us and other services out there, and they're not bad, they're just different, like an Angie's List or a Home Advisors, is that we have what we call the human element. So it's a comprehensive platform of home services. But the human element is that we know every one of those franchisees that we're referring to you as a customer, right? Angie's List can't say that. They've got tens of thousands of service providers that could take good care of your home, some of them, very good care of your home. but they don't know them personally like we do. They haven't brought them through Waco, Texas, where I've done training for every one of those franchisees. One of my goals is to touch every new franchisee who comes through basic training and make sure that they understand just how critical the values are to our business and to our future and to our brand promises. So that's, I think it's very profitable. And Dwyer, you want me to go down the private equity route?
Yeah.
Okay, so quick story on private equity. We were publicly traded until 2003 when we were very frustrated, small publicly traded company on NASDAQ. Our family owned too much of the stock, so institutions couldn't really invest much and feel like they could get out of it if they wanted to. So we decided to go to market, and Riverside, a private equity group, amongst a few others, came to the table, and we decided to go forward with Riverside. So it was a public to private deal. We grew the company beautifully with their help over about a 7-year period. We're going to go to market early, and then the recession happened, and we said, let's just keep growing. Forget the recession. We'll just keep growing and go to market later. So 2010, we sold, or Riverside sold their shares to another private equity group that we were thrilled to partner with called TZP. And 3 years in that relationship, I get a call from Riverside. They just raised a $1.5 billion fund. And by the way, I teased them, since they had sold us, that you guys are going to have to raise a really big fund in order to be able to buy Dwyer back, because I'd love to partner with you again when it comes time to go to market again. And they're like, yeah, Dina, that sounds nice, but likely not going to happen. They raised $1.5 billion fund, called me 3 years after selling us and said, you know, you've been teasing us for 3 years, because I kept throwing the numbers at them on how good we were doing and bragging on my team, and said, I just saw that they said, we just raised the $1.5 billion fund and we can't find businesses that we really want to put our money to work in. So we thought, why not buy Dwyer back if Dwyer would be open to that? So 3 years after selling us, they said, we know your current private equity partner has not had a chance to really harvest their returns, so we know we'd have to pay a premium. But if you're open, we'd love to have that discussion. We know it'd have to be quick, because we don't want to waste operations team's time. So they came back and bought us 3 years later for twice as much as they sold us for 3 years earlier. So I feel like I'm bragging. This is all factual. But what I will say is what makes me happiest is both of those private equity groups, both Riverside and TZP, ended up implementing a code of values after having spent time, we call it drinking the Kool-Aid, in Waco, Texas, but they thought we were crazy when they first came to Waco thinking, yeah, right, these code of values, until they had a chance to live it. They realized we were serious about it, and so then they both moved forward and implemented their own.
Very interesting. Now, you mentioned at dinner that you just came back from a company reunion, I think you call it. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, we just got back from Orlando. We had our annual reunion, named by our franchisees. Used to be called a convention, but they said, we're like family, let's call it a reunion. So we had about 2,000 people in Orlando this past weekend from all over the world, mostly the US and Canada, and just had an incredible event. That's why my voice is just about gone.
What kind of things do you do at a reunion like that?
Well, because we're neighborly. By the way, the customer said we were neighborly. That's where that name came from. We polled our customers, the end user customers, and 89% of them said neighborly was the word that best described the experience that they had. So we had a neighborly, our first block party. So we had 2,000 people outside at a block party. We had a dance, we had outdoor games, and lots of food and fun. We have keynote speakers. Stephen M.R. Covey was our keynote speaker on the speed of trust. Because in our relationships with our franchisees, they've got to have trust, and certainly the end user customer has to have trust with our franchisees and their frontline team members, who, Harvey, as you and I spoke about, these people are coming to your homes, right? Your home is our stage, and you've got to feel comfortable with the people that are coming to your homes, and those are the employees of our franchisees. So there's a lot of trust that goes all the way around our business.
Switching for a moment from customers to suppliers, I noticed on your website that you have something that's called Pro Trade Net. Could you explain what that is?
Yes. One of the benefits of being part of or at least part of larger franchise organizations is there's typically a buying opportunity where you can pool your buying power. So Pro Trade Net is really a wholly owned subsidiary of Dwyer, where we approve preferred vendors. So folks that are selling insurance to folks who are selling vehicles, whatever our franchise needs are in way of products or services, we need vendors who we trust will provide great value to our franchisees. And there's actually a rebate program that's created. So if somebody wants to be a preferred vendor of Dwyer, through Pro Trade Net, they can get approved, and they have to agree to a certain rebate. So it's not that they're negotiating a big discount up front with our franchisees. It's more about, for the number of dollars you get, the franchisees spend with you, we ask that you give a percentage rebate back that we split with our franchisees. So this convention last week, we announced $3 million in rebates that went back to our franchisees. So it's just a real big value proposition. And the more our franchisees buy from those vendors, the greater the savings is to the franchisees.
During your introduction, I had mentioned the Vet Fran program.
Right.
Could you tell the audience a little bit how that got started, what your involvement has been in it, and how's it going?
Yes. Can I first recognize the veterans in the room? If you're a veteran, would you mind standing so we can just thank you for your service? Thank you. Thank you, and God bless our veterans. We wouldn't be here today in this beautiful hotel room talking about beautiful things and getting to pray before our meetings had it not been for those of you who had the courage to protect our freedom. So during the Gulf War, my father was on the board of the International Franchise Association, and he was a vet himself, and he said, what are we doing to thank our veterans for protecting their free enterprise system in particular? And he founded the Vet Fran program. Back then there was no internet, so he managed it all from Waco, Texas. He had about 3 people on staff that managed the program. And then he died a few years later. The program didn't die because there were franchisors who were really committed to it, but it did get much smaller. So when I was fortunate to be invited to be on the board of the IFA is when I asked, this is during 9/11, that they adopt the Vet Fran program and make it part of the International Franchise Association so it doesn't die with a founder or an individual, it lives on. And so they adopted it and really have done a great job with the support of many of our team members. Our employees and our franchisees have been really behind Vet Fran, but there are some 640 franchisors across all industries now that provide typically their best financial incentives to qualified veterans to get into their franchise businesses. So the number you gave of over 6,000 veterans have now become franchises, that's since 2011. So since 2011, over 6,000 veterans have become franchisees amongst these different brands that are offering their best deals. It's a beautiful program. If you know a veteran that wants to be in their own business, it's a wonderful opportunity.
So now I'm going to ask you the opposite of the good profit question. In your industry, in the franchise industry in general, is there something that could be called bad profit? And what are the circumstances around bad profit in the franchising business?
Franchising is an interesting animal because franchisors typically only succeed if the franchisees are succeeding. To me, it's a really easy formula, right? Franchisees are doing well, we're going to do well as a franchise company. So bad profits in franchising would be probably greedy franchisors who maybe aren't, think about ProTradeNet, the buying group, who maybe aren't giving some of those rebates back to their franchisees, but instead keeping those all to themselves. Yet, in franchising, we're highly regulated, so there's something called a Uniform Offering Circular. Well, it's called an FDD now. See, I go way back. It's basically a disclosure to anybody considering a franchise. It tells you the good, the bad, and the ugly about the franchisor, and it would disclose all those things about in vendor relationships. We maintain all the rebates. So it's not that somebody's getting into it not aware of that, but that might be bad profits from my perspective because I think there's enough to go around. Why not share those rebates back with your franchisees? Some franchisors do it differently, and I'm not saying they're bad or they're creating bad profits, but it's just differently than I would do it. I think there's a lot to go around.
How long and wide is the runway for the Dwyer Group? How are you growing these days? How much of it is organic? How much it's through acquisitions?
Yep. Acquisitions for us, we always look for companies that we think are good complements to our menu of services. So you heard that we had 17 unique service brands now. Most of those are in the US and Canada, and then some of them are unique to our international offices. But for years, we've worked on these relationships. You build a business by building relationships, and there's a lot of companies that we wanted to own and bring under the Dwyer umbrella. But the last 3 years, we've gotten really lucky. We said the stars have aligned, and those founders of those companies were ready to sell, and Dwyer was a good home for their franchisees. So we think about trust again. These were founders who could have sold their businesses maybe for a little bit more to other groups, but they felt like Dwyer was a safe place to trust their babies, because if they founded the company, it was like their children. And those relationships with their franchisees are very critical. So we've grown about 100% over the last 3 years since Riverside reacquired us. And a lot of that is thanks to Riverside because they've been very willing to help us with acquisitions. So a good part of that growth has come through acquisitions, but a good part of it's also come through organic growth. Our franchisees on average are growing about 8% in what we call same-store sales, and that's across the board. So some very young, small franchise companies and some very mature. And the mature and older ones, it's harder to grow at 8%, right? When you've been around a long time, building a Mr. Rooter, for example. So the growth has come from both areas, which is very positive. And in franchising, it's the private equity groups really love us because it's kind of a never-ending opportunity. If you think about, we only have 2,800 franchisees. We could have thousands more. And we've got all this white space where we don't have franchise locations today. We also have existing franchisees who all have an opportunity to get better at their own businesses, right? We're in the business of helping them build their businesses. Many of them came from the trades, and we've taught them to be business owners now instead of tradespeople. So a lot of our franchises are, not all of them, but a lot of them are conversions. Joe's Plumbing, he was a good tech. Customers loved him, and all of a sudden he's starting to grow a business, and he doesn't know how to do that. So he converts his Joe's Plumbing to a Mr. Rooter, and we teach him how to be a business owner so that he can employ many, many more techs and serve many more customers. So really the growth is never ending. I know that might sound unreasonable, but it's not. It's true.
Great. So now I have to ask you a very technical business question. What was it like to be on Undercover Boss?
Oh, really technical. Well, did anybody see that episode? I know there's a few Undercover Boss folks in the room that like it. So it was a really wonderful opportunity. If you don't know what Undercover Boss is, it's an Emmy award-winning reality show that's in its 8th season. Now, how do you do that? A show where a boss goes undercover and people continue to be on the show and be surprised that there's a lot of stuff out there. So what Undercover Boss does is they have a rouge, and they pretty much tell the folks that are going to be filmed, because they have to get permission, that they're piloting some sort of reality show. In my case, it was a reality show called Keep Your Day Job. So I was posing as a secretary for my husband's business who wanted to get into the trades, and so these technicians had to teach me to be a plumber or an electrician or appliance repair tech, and then weigh in at the end of the week. Should she keep her day job as a secretary, or could she, in fact, be a plumber? If you didn't see the episode, I will tell you, 2 of them said clearly she should keep her day job. The other 2 said Dina could do, or Faith. They call me, this is another story. My name is Faith Brown. Guess where that came from? Yeah, CBS said, I'm sidetracking, sorry, but you have to know this. This group would appreciate this. So they said 3 weeks before the show was going to be filmed, they said, okay, Dina, we need you to come up with 4 potential undercover names. And you've got to pick names that you're not going to forget, because if we're filming all day and you mess up, the team's going to be really frustrated, right? Where you say your name's Dina instead of whatever the undercover name is. So I thought, okay, well, this is a pretty name and that's a pretty name. And then I thought, what name is going to hold me accountable? And what name's going to humble me? Because I wanted to go into this being humble about the role I was playing, not about me. It's about, are we really leading our values on the front line? That was my mission for going undercover. And so I came back and I said, okay, I got 4 names. Faith Brown, Faith White, Faith Black, and whatever, Faith something else. And they're like, okay, we know you want to be Faith. So Faith Brown passed the test. They had to do a background check and make sure that nobody else had that name, because they get sued for everything in the reality show business. And so Faith Brown was my name, and I never forgot it. I prayed a lot on that show. The reason I got to be on the Epic Bosses show is probably because I cried the most. If you haven't seen the show and you're a Catholic who appreciates a network like CBS showing me in church twice while undercover, pretty incredible stuff. I went into the church at the very beginning of my episode, and Father John got his 4 seconds of fame. He was great. And then they actually allowed me to come back into the church when I came back from basically a 10-day filming journey, and I fell apart. So this is where all the crying happened, because when I walked into that church, I had so much gratitude for the opportunity I have to lead a group of people that care so much about the customer experience. And I only got to meet with 4 team members, and they weren't perfect either, but I knew that they cared about the customer experience. And even though cameras were all over us, after a couple of hours of being filmed, you kind of forget the cameras are there. I got engaged with the employee in doing the work, really trying hard to do the work. Wasn't very good at it, but it was such an opportunity. Plus, I felt the load of responsibility that we have as leaders. So as leaders, as we're leading, we're all leaders in this room, no matter who you are or what role you have. If you're influencing anybody, you're a leader, aren't you? And I came back into that church and I thought, wow, what a responsibility. I was still CEO at that time. and later decided I wasn't the best person to be CEO anymore after 3 or 4 years after the show aired, and now I've got a wonderful guy as CEO now. But it was an amazing experience. It was not easy. The hardest part was standing around while you had to wait for the dog to stop barking so you could film the next piece, or the airplanes to quit going over so you could film the next piece. But dealing with the people was absolutely incredible. It was a wonderful experience that Dwyer could not have afforded. It didn't cost us anything other than we give some prizes at the end. The show has aired and continues to air every week. Saturday night, the night that our convention started last week, people were telling me, you were just on CBS or CNBC. And the Learning Channel, I think both stations aired the show. They just re-air it all the time. And we pay nothing for that. So we know that at least 60 million people have seen our episode. And that's all over the world. So it's really been a beautiful gift to Dwyer in many, many ways.
Great. I want everybody to know that Dina is going to be available after this interview out in the hallway to sell books as well as have books signed. So I would encourage you to go and have Dina sign a book for you. And Dina, on behalf of the Napa Institute and the Catholic University of America, thanks so much for joining us at the Good Prophet Conference.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great. Thanks for your